everybody to another episode of Ex-Muslim Somali Voices. This is a channel that's dedicated to the voices of Somalis who are ex-Muslim. And today we have none other than Nun Benson. So
Hi
Nun,
guys,
hi,
hi.
hi. Welcome, love.
Hi, how are you? And thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I am
It's a
so happy.
pleasure to be here on this channel.
I'm so happy to have you. So, if you could just like sort of introduce yourself a bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Nun Benson. Most people know me from Twitter as um, I'd say an ex-Muslim activist. I'm also one half of Waaq Nation's podcast. So we've got a podcast for Somali ex-Muslims where we just like dissect taboo subjects. But yeah, that's in me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Waaq Nation at the beginning. Um, I've listened to a couple of episodes, and it's quite
Yeah.
interesting. So can you tell us a bit about how Waaq Nation started, how it's been received, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we haven't done an episode in a while, but so Waaq Nation is, just I guess a culmination of like I guess we've got like underground spaces for Somali ex-Muslims, and we have a lot of chats, and I guess we've developed friendships amongst ourselves, because I guess to be a Somali ex-Muslim is to really be an outcast. Many people can't really be open with their families or um, communities. So we've kind of created an underground community of our own. So Waaq Nation is, I guess, um, kind of, a version of those conversations that we have in private. So obviously not everybody can, participate in Waaq Nation,
Yeah.
but, it is like a group thing. There's like, so we all contribute in different ways, whether, when we get questions from other Somali ex-Muslims, the whole group of people will, I guess, contribute and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because when I was talking to secular jihadists, they asked me about what walk this and personally when I first came across it was I noticed that people use walk as a way to identify each other.
Right.
And for the benefit of our audience, is it possible for you to explain what exactly walk is, or who walk is,
Okay.
or how that came
Yeah.
about? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just in a quick, briefly, so Waaq is the ancestral, the deity of our people. So prior to Islam, the Kushtic people, so not only Somali people, but Oromos, so other groups in Eritrea and Ethiopia also sort of, we had I wouldn't call it a religion per se, I guess a belief system.
Yeah, an African belief system, so to speak.
Yeah,
Right?
like a spiritual system, right?
Yeah.
So Waaq was this supreme deity in, I guess, a pantheon of God, similar to the Greek mythology. How you have Zeus, so Waaq is our Zeus. So we're atheists, though. I think I just want to clarify. So the point of Waaq Nation is not to somehow, because this is something that's actually come up, or we've actually been accused of trying to sort of resurrect our ancestral religion. And that's just simply not true. We are atheists and committed to atheism, but it's just a play on words, and we're just paying homage to our ancestral traditions.
Yeah, but it's also a way of people sending each other codes that hey, I'm an atheist, I'm Somali, and I don't believe in Islam. Which brings me to the whole identity of Somali being very intertwined with Islam, and majority of I can say the ex-Muslim Somalis that I am personally in contact with, they do struggle with the identity of being Somali because there's just so many voices telling them that once you reject Islam, then you're not really Somali.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the issue is, well, the crux of the issue for me is there is no Somali culture. And this is what I say. You know, actually today I received a message from a Somali Muslim girl, and on my Instagram, and she was, you know, just asking me, she said, sis, don't you think some of your criticism, you know, against, you know, Somali, I guess, Muslim culture the blame should be put on our ancestral African culture rather than Islam, which is, by the way, a really common, I guess, a common thought process that most Muslims, you know, most Somali Muslims, that's how they thought, you know, the culture is the issue, not the religion. But that's just simply not true. There is nothing left of the Somali culture. Like, there's nothing unique that Somalis do that this, I guess, distinguishes them from other Muslims. They pray 5 times a day. They wear hijab. Like, what is it what is it that makes us Somali? You know?
Yeah.
Nothing other than the Somali language. You know, dance is haram, so these people, they don't dance anymore. Music is, I mean, it's great. We've still got somewhat of a music industry. I want to commend them for that. And I love Somali music. I just want to say that. But I feel like the industry could have evolved more, and just the creative, you know, like film and music, even though, yes, we still do create, it's just very stifled and stunted. So what I'm trying to say is the culture, you know, the culture isn't growing, and it hasn't. Yeah, it's just pretty much inseparable from Islam. So when Somali Muslims turn around and say to me, "Oh, you're no longer a Muslim. Don't claim to be Somali." In a way, I can understand where that thought process comes from. Because to be fair, what they're really saying is there is nothing left of Somali culture. We are Muslim. You know, we're basically Black Muslims,
Yeah.
and that's the truth. You know, so. It's part of the reason why we named Waaq Nation, because you know, we want to revive whatever's left of the culture, which in my opinion is not much.
Yeah, in terms of what, like food, clothing, well, that sort of thing, or because
Well, I mean, what is culture? Yeah.
of course there are harmful culture, African cultural things that are also kind of unique-ish to Somalis, um, but also not so unique, because there are other cultures or other Muslims that may share that kind of cultural uniformity. But um, uh, for me, is sometimes is okay if it's misogyny. I don't care whether it was coming from Islam or if it's coming from an African culture. It's misogyny is misogyny, right?
Hmm.
If it's
Yeah.
FGM, you know, that kind of thing.
Polygamy, child
Yeah.
marriage. I mean, just thinking of the top of the things, like in Somalia, things that are common. You know, all these things, like, I'm not, okay, so a lot of Somalis will turn around and say, well, you know, if it wasn't for Islam, we would never have fought the colonizers, you know. You know, if it wasn't for that's their big kind of selling point, that Islam helped us kind of push back against colonizers.
Do you have thoughts
I
on that?
so my thought is, I won't delve into that because that probably get me into a lot of trouble.
Okay.
But yeah, my thought is
Wait,
they're
why?
wrong.
Wait,
You know,
wait, why? What do you mean, like
as in, because I just don't want to delve into Somali history, so to speak, because I'm not the expert or the go-to person, so I don't want to be
Oh, okay.
kind of. I mean, I've heard things, but I don't have primary sources for them, so I just don't want to be kind of, you know, talking to talk on the internet, and then
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, but you were saying okay, from maybe you could what you could share maybe is from experience, like because and this is something that I've noticed that is very very common, that even Somali ex-Muslims who are in the underground
mhm.
do struggle with their Somaliness,
Right.
or their uh, claiming, or even like they feel like they either have to reject everything
Hmm.
or continue being Muslim or whatever. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely. And I can totally understand why, and I definitely struggle with that myself as well too. Um, you know, I just don't know which other way to say it, but the Somali Islamic community, they're just bullies, you know. They are extremely violent, extremely aggressive, extremely abusive. Um, so when Somali girls, they cannot be themselves. Like you can't be a liberal Somali, you can't be. Conservatives are just extremely antagonistic. Yeah, there's just really no other way to slice it.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned it. Wait, did I cut you short?
No, that was it.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned it, because we're going to talk about the whole bullying for visible ex-Muslims.
Right. Yeah,
How
sure.
is it like?
So I mean, so just the other day, I actually had to delete. I had this anonymous kind of messaging app working, I suppose, at the back of my Twitter. I'm just explaining this for anybody that doesn't understand what Curious Cat is.
Yeah.
But so Curious Cat is like, I guess, an anonymous thing where people could send, you messages and stuff. So, I mean, just generally, the kinds of abuse that I've received from the community is just like, death threats, rape threats, people, sending my tweets to family members around the world. So people going out of their way to go find my family members, simply for me having a Twitter account, what else? So I had to delete my Curious Cat because I mean, I was getting death threats and rape threats for about 2 years. And, honestly, I just became desensitized to it. You really do have to have thick skin to be in this space. And, a lot of people ask me, they say, oh, how is it, Nun, that you have this thick skin? And how are you able to manage it? And what I would say to people is, you develop thick skin growing up in Islam. You're constantly berated. You're constantly insulted, constantly told you're not good enough. That's the whole crux of Islam, literally. They have all these hadiths, like 99 people that, when it comes to going to heaven,
you mean
they
like
say
for
900.
women? Yeah, like
for
for
women.
women in Islam, right?
Yeah, for women in Islam. Sorry, when you're growing up, I should be more specific. So, when you're learning the Quran, how you learn the Quran by being beaten, and not only beaten, but demeaned, called names by your teachers. So it's just like a culture of bullying. If you don't pray, people will call you names and stuff like that. If you don't cover as a woman, you'll be slut shamed, by other women and men, So the kind of abuse that I tried to explain it to people, like growing up Muslim, kind of gave me all the kind of thick skin to handle what it's like on the outside, of the Islamic community. Like, I don't care about these people anymore. I expected all this kind of abuse, but I don't look to them for love and validation. So I feel in that sense, I'm able to keep my power. And it doesn't bother me because I can kind of compartmentalize it and see it for what it is. I'm like, these people are like kind of in a cult, and even they don't see that what they're doing is wrong, So like, I have women, sending me abuse. I consider myself a radical feminist, It probably disturbs me most when I see women that really go above and beyond to send me quite vile things. But I mean, that's the nature of Islam. So it's the nature of the beast, So
Yeah, but I mean, I guess to some extent we're also exposed to the larger ex-Muslim community, and of course some experiences we can draw parallels, but there's something a little bit harsher towards Somali apostates as compared. Well, no, okay, I'm gonna rephrase that. This is not to say that other ex-Muslims, of course, different diverse families are different, and depending on the religiosity of the family, the reactions would vary. And obviously, there's guys who live in countries where death, they'll be put to death by the state. But I'm talking about this very communal, and we touched on it before. but I'm still curious about people's experiences about this communal thing that happens to Somali ex-Muslims, such that
Mhm.
they'll single out one Somali ex-Muslim maybe for a day, and they'll go there,
Mhm.
all of them, especially online.
Right, like thousands of them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a real collectivist culture. So we're really from a tribal culture. It's the only way I can liken it really is we're really, I try to explain to people, we're really one generation removed from the desert. Like these people, like are desert people that just have Wi-Fi. Like I really don't know any other way to say it. Like they really are, you know, like there's things that there's just, yeah, they really are one generation, you know, from being, you know, in a different world. So I just don't think we've had enough time to, I guess, process the PTSD, the trauma from the war. So we haven't had any sort of reconciliation or healing or any type of resolution to that. So then there's that ongoing trauma, and then we've got you know, continuous ongoing traumas with Al Shabaab. So the constant Al Shabaab attacks. So what I'm trying to get at is this is a traumatized people, and hurt people really hurt people. So
Yeah,
I
but these
really think,
online trolls, majority
yeah,
of them are actually in Western countries. So that's the
yeah,
part that, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm not excusing this bad behavior, but what I'm trying to get at is we're really from a culture of, you know, clan system and stuff like that. We're not that far removed from that. So these people are just in Western countries, but they have tribal and clan kind of worldviews, you know. We come from this culture where everybody feels that they're part of a tribe, they're part of a family, it's a collective honor, you know. So if one person steps out and is embarrassing the tribe, or, you know, turning their back on the tribe, or seemingly committing treason, you know, it's the responsibility of the entire tribe to police, you know, that person that's stepping out of line. So that's the kind of mentality they have. They feel it's the community's responsibility to police the behavior of all the community members, no matter if they're around the world, you know.
Okay,
Um,
and another common thing I get is if there were if somebody was, yeah, you know, they lost faith in Islam, but as
mhm.
long as they keep it private and not talk about it, it's a little bit um,
Yeah.
yeah, especially on the family aspect. I've heard from some ex-Muslims who have told me that, yeah, my family kind of know, but the moment if I tweet anything about it or I say anything about it or do an interview, it's a whole different situation. So
Right.
in a way, I want to understand, is that because of the collective honor thing that happens?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because basically, what you're doing is you're, I guess, airing the dirty laundry, right? So,
Yeah.
so now it's out there. They've got to take action, you know. And because, you know, now that, you know, I guess the community knows, it's like I think I said this before in one of these interviews, but my mum always used to tell me, you know, she always used to say, if you don't fear God, at least fear the shame of the community. Like they kind of say in Somali, you know, like fear, you know, yeah, fear the kind of, you know, have some kind of shame for your people, you know.
Can you say
So
that expression in Somali?
um
You don't have to.
like kind of like, yeah, I was gonna say, I won't say it in Somali
No,
because
no,
my
it's
Somali is
fine.
so bad.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, um but yes, so what I was going to say was, it's, again, it goes back to the thought that if the clan doesn't, I guess, see your shame, then it doesn't necessarily exist. But I guess if you're broadcasting it, that's when, and this is where you have honor killings and honor violence and stuff like that. Because what happens is the community, right, will go to your family members and say, hey, your daughter's kind of stepping out of line. She's embarrassing us, and then your family obviously will feel that kind of shame. And so and pressure to police your behavior. So that's when you get brothers, hitting sisters, fathers, hitting daughters. It's like a kind of cycle. Everybody's got to police each other. Yeah.
Another thing that's very common that also affects, I know the analysis is very complex, but it does affect Muslims.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, okay, so Dakan Ellis in a nutshell, I think Maha described it in the last interview, so it means return to culture. So it means, so basically it's a torture for diaspora kids. So basically people like me that were either born in the West or growing up in the West, they kind of see us as, too westernized. So what they do is they generally do it around from, I'd say, about 13 to maybe even up to 21. They'll just take you, trick you to go back to Africa, and they'll take you to like a really unsavory part of Africa where they can basically do anything to you, all types of abuse. It's a lot of physical abuse, and in an effort to straighten you out, and the straightening out, like, so what the causes of Dakan Ellis can be anything, like, your family could have caught you with a cigarette. They could have caught you, some families are so extreme that it's like seeing their daughter wear jeans, they're like, okay, no, she's got to go to Somalia. So it really varies on the kind of family that you come from, what type of, I guess, sin they'll take you for. But yeah, it's a type of torture, I'd say.
Yeah, it's a very common towards ex-Muslims who have like sat down with their families and said, hey, I don't believe in Islam anymore.
Oh, it's even worse than just, ex-Muslims. It's anybody that dissents or shows anything un-Islamic. And that's the barbarity of Islam. It's not even, the worst part about apostasy laws is not that it even targets apostates, but they target Muslims. Any Muslims that are liberal or a little bit, so-so or whatever, they are also subject to those same laws. And so these youth that I'm describing, some of them might have, not really done much, or or been Muslim, but just had a boyfriend, or posted a picture on social media, and then they're being shipped off.
Can you explain then why? Is there any reason why, let's say, Western-born Somalis are not going to the authorities, to their schools, to their social workers with this kind of stuff?
Well, I can break it down easily. I mean, I was born in the West, but I mean, I'm 29, and it's something that I struggle with. I can't imagine that Somali kids that are younger than me would have it any easier. We come from this kind of like, in the Somali culture, they've got this kind of culture similar to the African Americans in America. They've got that no snitching, type thing.
Yeah.
Like there's all this stuff about, not being a rufian or whatever, So it's really a culture of silence. So I know so many, for example, girls that have been, really beaten bad by their families, like kind of hospitalized, and they've hid it, they've, made excuses, haven't pressed charges, even though there were significant injuries by family members, like honor violence, honor violence, I see it all the time, but, it's something that we have to hide, because if you report on a crime, for example, and things don't go your way, that could end up in your on a killing, And I know this, I'm probably going to get a few DMs like, oh, Somalis don't honor kill. I really disagree.
Yeah, I disagree. I disagree.
I disagree. Yeah, I disagree.
Just that it's very hidden, and it may not be and maybe the scale is not as large, I could say, but it is also quite becoming quite common, especially as people evolve and there's maybe larger number of just kids who are becoming more liberal and more westernized, so to speak. So then it's the people who say on a killing doesn't happen within Somalis is flying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
They're wrong.
and even if honor killing, okay, put that to a side. Honor violence is the norm. It's the norm. For example, in Somali families, to see a brother beating up his sister because she's not wearing hijab, or like that's just the norm. That's honor violence. That brother feels
Yeah,
that his honor is being threatened by his sister wearing jeans. How common is
yeah,
that? And this is the thing that, and by the way, this is the reason why we get all this abuse from all these Somali trolls. It's to intimidate us. It's to force us back into silence. It's to remind us that in our culture, it's unacceptable to tell the truth of the reality of the culture. So basically, it's the whole thing of, "Ebtas or sarin," don't air our dirty laundry. So
yeah,
even if, but I think, yes, silence for me is a stance. So I can't accept it. You know.
yeah, and I agree with you, and that's why I think we're all trying to do our bits to just speak out and bring these issues out to the fore. But I also remembered that whenever a Somali ex-Muslims comes out into the public,
Hmm.
it doesn't last very long. I wanted to understand that. It
Right,
doesn't
right.
last very long.
Well, I mean, look at we just talked about our queen, Ayan Hefsi, like she's legitimately still under 24-hour protection.
Yeah.
So, like, we come from an extremely violent
But
community that
Ayan is a
cannot
whole
be.
league on her own.
She's another level. Yeah, she's another level. But
Yeah.
we can't downplay the level of, even if Ayan Hefsi aside, right? There's another one of Somali women heroes is Mama Million. Mama Million Subin. So if the
Yeah,
audience
the
doesn't know about her,
Mama Malyun, I remember, oh man, I remember Mama Malyun, the amount of attack and
exactly.
trolling,
She was a Muslim. Yeah.
stuff she received was just, to a point where she had to take a break. I remember. Um, I don't want to mention names, but there are also one or two Somali ex-Muslims who have done a couple of public things in the UK, in America, who um, the threat became so real and so close that it
Hmm.
moved from just online trolling to a threat becoming so close that
I know people that's happened to.
they had to take they had to put their safety first.
Yeah, I
You know,
actually got warned by a friend of mine. Actually, I have a friend that keeps, just got the best, intentions for me, but is really worried about me showing my face and stuff because, she lives in the US and she actually got her car vandalized and because she was speaking out a few years ago. So they kind of forced her back into the closet. She got her car vandalized, um, and basically somebody tried to break into her parents' house, and and they scribbled some stuff on her parents on the back window of her mother's house, and her parents are elderly, so when she realized that her mother could potentially be targeted by terrorists, and there's really
yeah,
the issue
I
is
also
like
know
at
two
Western.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know two people whose relatives got killed, and who lost. Uh, one lost a was it cousin. One lost a grandfather, and another one had a cousin injured um,
Hmm.
because of what they were doing in public space. And the thing is, I know that I'm only, like I've only been doing activism for a couple of months. It's not even been a year. And the amount of stuff you can get people who you never thought would try and tracing you and
Mhm.
sending you DMs and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, but in a sense, what I want to talk about is what I want to bring it out to the fore. How bad is it for Somali
Oh my
ex-Muslims
God.
in the public?
Oh my God. Yeah. It's just put it this way. It's gotten so bad for me. Like I can kind of understand. Earlier when we were discussing like Somalis not wanting to identify as Somalis, for me it's so bad that I just don't really want to identify with any Somalis. I've actually had Muslim Somalis that last year took issue with my Twitter, and they kind of cut me off and stuff. They're sort of, I guess, boomeranging back that want to just conversate, and because some of my elder aunties and stuff like that were I guess asking why I hadn't been around for like last year and a half. So some of my relatives and stuff were like, oh, what happened to Nuriya? Like, I mean, they're loving people, especially my elders and stuff. I mean, they're loving and stuff. I don't blame them. They just set in their ways. They didn't come up with Islam. They're just following,
Yeah.
But some of the younger ones, some of the other people that, cut me off and stuff, are trying to make their way back. And people have tried to apologize and stuff because they now recognize that I'm not just some kind of weird anomaly, or I'm not having some kind of, life crisis or whatever. They recognize that it's a larger phenomenon and there's so much more. It was actually one of my aunties that had come back from Somalia. She spent some time in Somalia and she came back. And she actually said to her daughters that had cut me off that she's like, I know, she's like, when I was young, she's like, I knew some Somalis that didn't believe, they weren't Muslim. So she was like, so she was actually encouraging, she was saying to her daughters, like, why, that's not a reason to cut off Nun, So
that's
I guess
something to
these
be
people
optimistic about, right?
in some
Like,
ways, yeah, but I'm kind of a bit hesitant because I kind of know, I mean, I know they love me and I love them too. I just want to clarify, if they're ever watching, I love them too. But I just feel like at this point in my life, I don't trust my community. Like, there's just no other way to slice it. I don't trust my community. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm bickering, arguing, fighting, to defend myself. So I'd just rather not be around them. That's just my choice. So they've tried to reach out to me, but I've just, like, the door's closed. Like, I'm fine with them cutting me off. If anything, it set me free. I feel like I can be myself. I don't want to go back into the box or a closet or, contort myself into a version, an acceptable ex-Muslim Somali version for them. I'm past that point, So I'm okay being a community unto myself, So
yeah, the sad part is I'm yet to meet a Somali ex-Muslim who has a great relationship with their family. I'm yet to meet one.
Yeah, it's
by
difficult.
great I mean like you're in each other's lives.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean by great.
But what I would say is that is ultimately a reflection of Islam, that Islam destroys family relations. That's what I personally believe. Because when I think about it, it makes me really sad. Like, I've got really religious element parts of my family. So family members, I've got, a lot of family members that wear niqab, that are extremely religious. And I have nothing but the utmost love and respect for them as human beings and as people, and for the memories and the love, the family bonds that we have. Like, I really do love my family. I don't just say that, and it just makes me sad, like, that they don't, like, we can't be in each other's lives because of their beliefs. Like, their beliefs literally cause them to be self-righteous, to not want to associate with anybody who's not Muslim. Like, what kind of beliefs is that? Like, since becoming an ex-Muslim, like, I guess initially I was saying to myself, I'm like, I'm not going to be, one of those critical ex-Muslims. The first thing an ex-Muslim says to themselves once they leave Islam, once you get through all the grief of finally saying, I'm an ex-Muslim, the first thing you say to yourself, I'm not going to be one of those ex-Muslims that just bashes Islam, And then you wait, and then you see what's out there. You start
Yeah,
reading the comments. You start looking around. You start looking around at the way Muslims behaving. You start looking at them with fresh eyes, and you're like, wow, really? Are these people are they serious? Like, are they just
yeah,
gonna harass somebody and bully somebody and attack somebody just for no reason other than some book from way back in the days telling you that it's the right thing to do? Like, that's when you start to see how Muslims are and how they act, and when you see basically the Quran and the Hadith, what I now say, the Sunnah in action. When I see the Sunnah in
most
action, I'm
yeah, most
angry. I'm angry.
ex-Muslims also. Yeah, I know, and most
You
ex-Muslims
know,
actually study the Quran and Hadith. Even after they have stopped believing, they would
definitely.
study more, because then they're looking at it from a different perspective this time. They weren't
Right, right,
before, when they were believer, they were looking at it from another perspective. So for me, I also, even now in my activism, I do a bit of research, just to just to separate people from the text, and say
right,
that people are behaving this way because of this text. You know what I mean?
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny because now, actually, as an ex-Muslim, I would say I'm a lot less angry and resentful at my family, now than when I was a Muslim. Because when I was a Muslim, even like when I used to identify, I'd say as a Muslim, but I was very liberal in my views and obviously breaking the rules. I would say I was very resentful for their judgments and, just, the kind of treatment that I was getting. But now, as an ex-Muslim, I feel sorry for them. Like, I feel sorry for them. Like, I feel like they're
More
trapped,
empathy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got much more empathy for them.
Yeah.
I understand that they're indoctrinated. I think I'm even much more empathetic in the way I speak to them, when I do get the opportunities to, because I can turn the other cheek now, believe it or not. I'm not a Christian, I'm an atheist, but I can turn the other cheek now a lot easier than when I was a Muslim. When I was a Muslim, it was completely, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
took it
think
personally. I
yeah.
thought they were bad people. Now I don't see them as bad people. I see Islam as the bad thing, um, because
Yeah.
I don't think that my family. I feel that if my family wasn't Muslim, if my community wasn't Muslim. I mean, I love Somali people. I just want to clarify and say I love Somali people. I love being Somali. I think the Somali culture is really beautiful. The very tiny aspects that we have left, like for example, the music, um, the non-halal music is beautiful. The
There
music,
is wait, there
um,
is a halal
um,
music. There is
I
a
know, yeah,
halal
with the
music.
durban. Like I hate the durban stuff, like the one drum, but when they have the whole, orchestra and the guitars and yeah, like
Wait,
the
wait, wait, wait.
trumpets in Somali
Wait.
music. So
Let's
that I really
recap that.
love. What
Hang
else?
on. Let's recap that for our audience. How do you separate between the haram music and the halal music within that cultural music scene? Uh,
Oh, okay. Well, I wouldn't say. I should say that there's no really haram and halal music, but I'm just saying, so in Islam, you're allowed to have. So the only type of music you can have is like a one-tone drum, literally one-tone drum, um, with a singer. And the singer, there's some specifications about what the person can sing and what octaves and stuff. I'm pretty sure. But anyways, so yeah, so like I'm not talking about from weddings and stuff. Like I like Brambur though. Like I like Brambur. I think it's a cool concept. But so yeah, like I like
Brambor
the
is a
dancing as
Somali dance for which is very common in weddings. Just explaining to
yeah,
them.
weddings.
Yeah.
Right. I like all these cultures. So our dancing cultures, our music culture. I also like Somali theatre culture. I think it's kind of um yeah, so these aspects of the culture I think I'd really, love to see more work being put into and it built on. But yeah, so I just want to say, for me personally, all the negativity I have towards, Somali culture comes from the Islamic aspects of Somali culture, you know.
But there are some aspects. I mean, there's some other African aspects that Somalis just mishmashed Islam with African culture and just, you know, weaved it in like that. I wouldn't say like
Aside from
only
FGM,
Somalis. Huh?
aside from FGM, there's not much. I wouldn't say there's much. I mean, aside from FGM, that's the only thing that they can say. But that to me
Well,
also,
FGM is
okay,
Islamic.
FGM,
FGM is
it's
Islamic.
Islamic. This is the thing. So
Yeah.
Islam allows it. You know, people. So there was Somali Muslims will say, "Oh, you know, you guys love Waaq so much, so I guess you guys love FGM." But I'm just like, well, if Islam was, you know, the fair and correct way of life for all human beings for all time, then it would have erased the barbaric practice such as FGM. But
Not condone
clearly,
it. Yeah.
not condone it exactly. Same thing with
Yeah.
slavery, you know.
Yeah.
So slavery
Yeah, and that's a
existed
known
before
fact.
Islam. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, FGM was pre-Islamic. Male circumcision was pre-Islamic. Slavery was pre-Islamic, but there are lots and lots of hadith that just simply continue with the pre-Islamic stuff and even give justification for it. And then what you have
Exactly.
in the 21st century is different madhabs using different ways to justify different things, you know? So
Hmm.
I don't normally agree with when people say that, fine, of course, there are Muslim communities that don't practice things like FGM, but
Hmm.
um,
It's
it
a
is
red herring.
entrenched.
I mean,
You know, it is
yeah,
entrenched in of the four madhabs of Sunni. I mean, two of them. One of them says it is allowed, but it's not obligatory. Between Hanbali, no,
and Hanafi. Hanafi, I don't think
Hanafi,
that. Yeah,
Hanafi,
the Hanbali, I could see them doing
Shafi,
it. Yeah,
Shafi definitely
Shafi'i
says
definitely
it
does it.
is fard
That's what I
and
was gonna
it
say. The
is
Indonesia.
obligatory. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
obligatory. So, and that's
So
what
just to
Somalis
break
actually
down,
practice.
so what they will say is, you know, Islam just made the Sunnah, so the Sunnah version. So the Sunnah, so there's different variations of FGM, right? So
Yeah,
that's so Fir'aun, which is the most dramatic one, which is the one where they cut off the labia and they sew it. Um,
yeah,
and they basically leave two holes. It's caused the most damage. That one, like its name, is derived from the pharaohs. So, I mean, that is frowned upon in Islam, but it's still conducted. It's not like it was banned. Um, but the one they say, oh, it's sunnah. So that's cutting of the clitoris, cutting
yes.
or making a cut of the clitoris. So, I mean,
Actually, now they
this
have
things.
big sunnah and small sunnah, especially within
Yeah, I
Islam.
know.
It's like the
I was
big
gonna say,
sunnah
yeah,
and the
they love
small
that.
sunnah. And when I really got deep into it, and so what's the difference? And you see these things have metamorphosized as
Yeah,
people evolve, and they have,
it's
you know, they just developed different names. That's it. It's the same
It's just
shit.
nonsensical. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
just like they have an aversion to clitorises. Like I don't understand. Like they really do.
yeah,
And I just want to add as well too. With FGM comes FGM culture, right? So this is
yeah,
something I think everybody knows in the world about FGM, but what people don't understand is FGM culture. And FGM culture is what I'm calling FGM culture is
yeah. Go on.
um, the culture in which like women and girls are shamed for having clitorises. So, you know, actually FGM is something that a lot of girls are excited about. You know, I know this sounds crazy to a lot of Western audiences now because I'm like thinking, what the hell? But there's this whole culture of, you know, coming of age and, you know, womanhood. I know it happens to little girls, it's nonsensical, but I remember, for example, thankfully I wasn't cut, but when my first when my cousins had come from Somalia or whatever, I was about 12, right? So, and I remember being aggressively bullied by my aunties and my cousins and everything, and they would call you things like kinterley, kinterbad kapta, and like all this stuff. So all this stuff to say like you've got a clitoris. Like they actually think a woman that has a clitoris past a certain age is dirty, undesirable, um, just like something's wrong with that woman, or she'll definitely be a whore. She'll be definitely loose sexually. So for them, it's a way to curb a woman's sexuality.
Yeah,
It's also, a way to clean the vagina and kind of make it more presentable. That's the way I was taught and told. This is why I'm saying FGM culture.
Yeah.
These are things that they try to, they kind of sell girls.
It's about the shame. Yeah, it's about
The shame, yeah.
which can sound very mind-boggling to other people who are not fully aware, is that that shaming of the fact that even the very lucky ones who have survived and not had anything, who didn't who weren't exposed to FGM, would then experience this multi-layered shaming of
and they ostracize you as well. Like I've even had friends tell me, friends that were back home in Somalia, for example, and that for whatever reason weren't cut, or they got cut later. So I remember one of my friends was telling me that, she's like, girls used to bully her in the playground, people wouldn't play with her until she got cut. So she had to beg her grandma to organize to cut her because her parents were progressive. And that was something that was common ironically, in pre-war Somalia. Pre-war, I just want to tell something to the audience. Pre-war Somalia, so that's literally 1992, Somalis were more progressive, more secular, less religious than they are now. Like, we've actually regressed as a culture in 30 years. So there was a time where I think FGM would have been slowing down.
Does this have something to do with the fact that for majority of Somalis, after moving maybe to different parts of the world, I think it's quite layered actually. Then they got exposed to a different version of Islam.
Definitely. Okay. And in the camps as well too, in the refugee camps as well too. So what I heard was, like, Salafis came from Egypt and Wahhabis came from Saudi Arabia. And so, Somalis were very vulnerable after the Civil War. So, prior to the Civil War,
they came with all their charities and madrasas.
Exactly, their charities and, madrasas and everything within updated version of Islam. And I love the way Somalis talk about it. Well, they say in Somali, but I'll just say in English, but they'll say things like, we weren't Muslim back then. I'm like, what? Like, they're like, yeah, we weren't proper Muslims back then. Now we're Muslim. I'm like, so hang on. In 2009, you've got the updated program. So your grandparents are going to hell, but you're on the right path. They're like, yeah, the old days, people didn't, they weren't really Muslim. I'm like, so how does that compute, like?
Yeah, I hear that a lot as well. I hear that a lot.
It's just nonsensical.
Yeah, from Somali Muslims who would say, oh yeah, but before the war we weren't even Muslim. That's why the war happened and that kind of stuff.
Oh yes, yeah, that's I know. Yeah. Oh no, they say. Oh no, I just want to say this for the crowd because I just want my Western viewers to get a good laugh in. But they say, oh, they're so weird, honestly. Oh yeah. So what they say is, so our last president was secular, right? And I'm neither pro or against him. I should just say that. But so he apparently said, a year or two before, a couple of years before the Civil War, that he was really all about secularism and, he was a real nationalist. So he was really progressive. So he said, men, from this day forward, he made a speech saying, from this day forward, every Somali boy, girl, man and woman will be equal. So I've heard this from women that have told me that Somalia went down the day Siad Barre said out loud that a woman is equal to a man. These are Somali women that are telling me, they're like, how dare the president say that? They're like, the day he said that was the day God said, yep, this country's got to go. Simply for Siad Barre uttering that men and women are equal. They were like outraged. They're like, how dare he? They're like, the audacity of the man.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's one thing I don't want to forget, which is, if you don't mind me asking you, when did you stop believing? And can you tell us a little bit briefly? You don't have to get into detail if you don't want to.
Sure.
But,
Sure. So what I say now is I left officially in 2016. And what I'll say briefly is I come from a super religious family. So, I started learning the Quran when I was like literally 4 years old. I didn't actually go to normal schools. I always went to Islamic schools, It's kind of
Well,
indoctrinated young.
In
In Australia, yeah.
Okay.
Because from 4 years old, because my mum wanted to, unfortunately, there wasn't really Somali people here. So my mum wanted us to keep us near the Muslim community. So I grew up with a lot of like Arabs, Turks, Bosnians, all different kinds of Muslims, a lot of Indonesian Muslims. So I really it really introduced me to a lot of Levantine and other cultures. But yeah, so that's what I was brought up around. So I would say it was about 2010 for me when I knew that I would never practice Islam fully. I used to call myself agnostic then. At the time, I just didn't know that there was such a thing of leaving Islam. I didn't know apostasy was an option. Like, but I always thought to myself, I would never, like, I used to tell myself in my head, like, I'll never wear the hijab. I'm never planning to pray. I'm never planning to go to Hajj. Like, I consciously said that to myself around 2010, but I'd still politically, I'd say, identified as Muslim. So I would tell people I'm agnostic. I also felt a lot of the heat from, the various terrorist attacks throughout the years. So that's why I was calling myself agnostic, but I did identify as a Muslim. In 2016, I watched a clip from Mo the Atheist. I love Mo Said. He's like one of my number one favorite ex-Muslims. Yeah, I love him. I just watched the clip and, he really did speak to me. Like, and I felt that I was just lying to myself, I'm like, I don't believe this, Everything he said, I felt like it validated all the questions I'd always in my head. It's like Imtiaz Shams says it the best, I think. He says, it's not that as if we learned any new information. I always knew Aisha was 8 years old, 6 years old, whatever. I always knew all these stories. It's just that as you get older and as you have different experiences, your morality changes, you reflect back on that and you're like, well, hang on, wait, he was 53 and he had sex with a 9-year-old. Like, it just doesn't sit, like, it no longer, it gets to the point where, I guess it's like a boiling pot.
It's the development of critical thinking as well. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. I mean, people go through different phases of how they emotionally accept it, but the critical thinking does, for me, at least in my experience, I can say I was consciously knew I don't believe for 6 years before I moved here. So in a way, but before then I was also like, I don't like that, I don't agree with that, I don't agree with that, I don't agree with that, but you kind of just don't, emotionally, you don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, so it's the critical thinking development. I mean, and it's a normal human experience, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why we do what we do. I think, it's like that saying I always say, you can't be where you can't see. So for me, I'd never seen anybody that had left Islam. Like, if I had seen somebody who had left Islam as a teenager, I would have been like, well, I mean, if this was like ex-Muslim, like if the internet was a thing when I was young and, I'd seen people like me, that leaving Islam, I would have left too. Like,
that's why Mariam Namazia says the internet is doing to Islam what the printing press did to Christianity.
I know, thank goodness.
So on that note, I'm gonna, do you have anything to add?
Awesome. No, I was gonna say we'll hopefully wrap up on this point,
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me, Nun. It was so nice having you. This was fun.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye,
Anytime, sis.
everybody.
Anytime.
Just say bye-bye to the audience. Bye.
Bye-bye.